Well, good morning, everyone. My name is John Grover. I'm a board member at City Ministry Network, and I have the privilege today of introducing our speaker. I first got to know Carl many years ago, right, Carl, when we were freshmen at Modesto High School, graduating class of 1971. So I think at the time, Carl and I came from different backgrounds, as many incoming freshmen do, to a large school. And we had something in common. We came from the west side of Modesto. And that launched a friendship for Carl and me that has lasted a lifetime and is rich and very rewarding to me. And so I want to tell you a bit about Carl. He's the husband of Kathy, his wife of 38 years. He has 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and he worked for over 23 years as a peace officer counselor for the state of California. He has expertise in a number of areas, including training in cultural diversity, sexual harassment, hostage negotiation. That might come in handy sometime, Carl. And he owns a local business that does screen printing and embroidery. He's known to many youth in the region as coach for his work as a coach in track and field. And on top of that, he is the pastor of True Light Community Church in West Modesto. Carl has a passion for this community that is deep and wide and rich. And I know him to be a tireless advocate for people learning to know one another, getting past boundaries and barriers in their life. So I want to introduce to you this morning my good friend, our good friend, Carl Bryant.
And I apologize, you get my morning voice, but quick task before you get too comfortable. I have a task for you. If you're sitting at a table where everybody looks like you, that means, if you're older than 50, you're bald, you're out of shape, whatever. I'd like you to change tables because you're going to have a conversation. So if everybody looks like you, please move to a different table. We good here? Okay.
Want to mute that for me real quick? Sorry, man.
And I'm going to do my best to be time conscious. I do coach track, so I have my stopwatch set here for 25 minutes. Man, I need your permission this morning. Is it okay for me to use the words black, white, brown, people of color? Is it okay for me to use that? Okay, because identifications have changed so much over the years. I'm not even sure what to call myself, so you might hear me use black, you might hear me use African American, but my mom named me Carl, so I'm okay with that. But the only reason I'm here this morning to talk on this important topic of empathy is because Reverend Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson weren't available. Now, some of you that went right over your head, but that's okay. I've learned over the years to, if you don't know something, to ask questions. So I'm going to ask a couple questions this morning, and you can jot it down at your table anonymously, just write a response, and just leave it there for me. First question I want to ask you is, how many of you know me? Just raise your hand if you know me. Okay. Good. The other question would be, how do you know me? Because when I think about empathy, empathy can only take place as you get to know someone. And while looking at that video, which I looked at several times, and thinking about this thought of how do these things look, what do these things look like through my eyes? I noticed that among the kids interviewed, that there was one group that was noticeably absent. You know what group that was? Anybody? Oh, man, you guys are sharp. I love that. There were no white kids. So it led me to this question: are kids of color the only ones dealing with a lack of empathy? Would that be a true or false statement? Absolutely. So another question I have, and I'm going to ask you this. Everybody in here, I'm going to assume that everybody in here is honest.
Is John still here?
As the room empties, question is, do you struggle with demonstrating empathy or feeling empathetic? Is that a struggle for you? Because one of the things I believe that we cannot talk about this subject without talking about race or bias or prejudice. As a trainer for the state, the first time we did a cultural diversity training, we had about 100+ people gathered from all over the state in a setting just like this. And we put up a poster. This poster had pictures of probably 60 people, and we left it there. Afternoon, we came back and, we asked them that morning, did anybody in the room have a problem being prejudiced, have any biases, any stereotypes? And nobody raised their hand. Nobody. This poster set up there, and finally we said in the afternoon, now, we have exercise for you. Look at this poster, and there's pictures of various people up here. And we said, how many of you can identify the person that's the 7-Eleven store owner? How about the librarian? How about the teacher? How about the attorney? How about the taxi cab driver? How about the laundry owner? We listed several things, and then we went on to another exercise. And so they gathered in their groups, and they were busy trying to pick out who these people are. At the end of the day, we decided, okay, it's time to go home. They said, wait a minute. Well, who's who? And I said, what are you talking about? Well, who's the taxi cab driver and who? I said, yeah, we forgot about that. How many of you picked this person right here with the turban as being the 7-Eleven store owner? And every hand went up. How about this lady here with the glasses, white lady with glasses? Is she the librarian? Yeah. And on it went. Finally, we said, hey, thank you very much. Have a good evening. They said, but aren't you going to tell us who's who? And I said, we don't know these people. And we left that day, and they came back the next morning with a total different attitude. And we asked the question again, how many of you have a problem with bias, stereotypes, or prejudice? Every hand in the room went up. So I think today, if we're going to champion empathy or nudge the needle from empty to full, Dr. Brown shared some things that I would like to highlight a little bit through my eyes. W.E.B. Du Bois made this statement in one of his books, and herein lies the tragedy of the age. Not that most men know something of poverty. Not that men are wicked, but who is good. Not that men are ignorant, but what is truth? Nay, but that men know so little of men. We know so little of men. Question this morning, another one. When was the last time you ever had a real conversation with somebody that looks different from you? A real conversation. Because those of you that said you know me, it's because we've spent time together. And you cannot develop empathy for people or a group or anybody that you haven't spent time with. Let me change that up a little bit more. When was the last time you had a conversation or had dinner or invited somebody into your home that looks different from you? And being that I'm black this morning, I'm just going to use black, white. When was the last time you had a conversation or dinner with somebody black? Because the reality is we have to look at numbers. In this county, blacks, African Americans, are 3% of the population. So if you're white, and it's not your fault that you're white, that's just the way you're born. That task for you is daunting. Because if you live in a certain area of town, and you may be well-intentioned, but the numbers would make that a difficult thing for you to do. So whatever you do along these lines in order to understand and be empathetic with another person that doesn't look like you, when the numbers are that skewed, it's small, very small. So in order to do that, you have to be intentional. But think about it for a minute. When was the last time that took place for you? And if you can't answer that question or you don't know, ask yourself why. Because it's obviously this subject is important to a lot of people. Many of you I know because I've seen you in the community. You've done some amazing things. And I'm asked the question often, because I've lived here all my life, are things getting better in this area of empathy and race? And it's so uncomfortable to talk about. And in this life, you didn't get to choose your name, but you do get to choose who you are as a person, the character that you demonstrate. And empathy is one of those characteristics that I think goes a long way. You can't empathize with somebody if you've never gotten close to them. And as you sit around these tables this morning, each of you brings something to that table. And I want to encourage you, as you maybe shared earlier, but share again what your experience is. As I share with you a few things from my life, Dr. Brown, she brought up some great things. She described empathy as going down that hole, to me, which represents proximity. And once again, you can't empathize with someone if you've never gotten close to them. You never sit down at the table and do what she described as feeling with them. What are we afraid of? You know, when we talk about this topic of empathy, race, bias, are we fearful of being shamed or worse, being blamed for something that we had nothing to do with? Reality is, we're products of those that get a hold of us first. So if all you've known all your life is one particular ethnic group or one particular neighborhood, that's all you know. And if you're white and you've never been around black people, I can't expect you to understand what it's like to look at life through my eyes, any more than if I grew up around all blacks, which in this county was impossible, but you couldn't expect me to understand what it's like to look through the eyes of a white person. So if we've never had that real talk, a real relationship with those that don't look like us, where do we form our opinions of those people? I would dare to say that they're formed by the media. And you know, if they say it, it's got to be true, right? My kids used to say stuff and they would say, you know, Dad, they said, and I would say, who are they? And sometimes we just accept things because somebody said it. It could have been your parents, could have been people you went to school with. So I want you to stay with me for a minute in this scenario. If you're white and you're walking down the street and you see 3 young black men walking towards you wearing cornrows, maybe a hoodie. You guys know what cornrows are, right? Oh, okay. Not walking down a row of corn. No, this is a hairstyle. And in that moment, you've never had a meaningful contact or relationship with a black person, and you got your image of black people from TV or the internet, and during you're forming your opinion of who these people are, you saw them doing a couple things on TV, playing sports, entertaining, or protesting or rioting. So as these men approach you and they don't have a ball, and they're not singing or dancing, where does your mind go? Absolutely. But what changes that scenario? For my friend John, if that's John and he looks into that crowd and he sees me, all of a sudden that fear that he had is eliminated. Would that be correct? See, it's out of relationships that we learn to empathize, and man, knowing, coming alongside, hearing another person's story, not trying to fix them, sometimes not even saying a word, like Dr. Brown said, man, thanks for sharing. I don't even know what to say. And it's not just a racial issue. Where do we learn empathy? Look around you. Do you know anybody that's hurt because they're going through a divorce or an illness? For 5 years, I had the privilege of working with kids with autism, special needs. I learned empathy. I learned what their parents go through. And I said, I don't know if these kids ever learned anything from me, but what I learned from them is that not one day did they come to school complaining. They just enjoyed each other, enjoyed their friendship without any reservation. My life, when I thought about this subject, empathy, my life has gone so many directions, none that I planned. And when I began working for the Youth Authority, I went into an institution and I saw more black people than I'd ever seen in my life. And I thought, we're 12% of the population. How did our institution become 66% black? So I just started me on a journey of researching, doing things, and finding out about when mass incarceration began. Currently today, there are over 2 million people incarcerated in the United States. 40% of those are African American or black, and most of those are men. How did it happen? Well, change a law here, change a law there, and a certain group is targeted. But that wasn't my experience for the most part until I really took a deep look at it. I'm a product of a home where my father spent multiple years in prison for different things. I had friends who didn't look like me, whose dads were just as much of drunks or alcoholics, whatever you want to call it, as my dad was, but their situation was different. Their dad didn't get locked up. What changed for me? How did empathy impact my life? My life was forever changed when I was about 12 years old by a man who happened to be white, who empathized with my situation. He was my coach. And although he was interested in me because I was a pretty good baseball player, it went beyond that. He took an interest in me as a person. He introduced himself to my mother, and he assured her that he would look out for me. Now, at 12, I didn't understand what that was all about. My mom grew up in Texas. She saw the Klan lynch a black man for what they call reckless eyeballing. But the thing that was different, she never dumped that on us until I got old enough to ask questions about her life as a youngster. My grandmother grew up in Oklahoma, lived in Tulsa in the 30s, and there was a riot based on a rumor that somebody did something, a black man did something. The whole town was burnt down, but she never told us. So I looked at my life, and my parents, my grandparents shielded me from those horrible things that have taken place in our country that we cannot deny. And part of the problem with dealing with empathy is that when you deny that something happened to somebody, you'll never be able to empathize. You'll never be able to walk together with them. You won't want to go down that hole. Getting back to my coach, he just didn't coach me. He got to know my family. There was 8 of us. He knew all my brothers and sisters. He understood my situation with not having a father in the home. In other words, he did what Dr. Brown was talking about. He empathized with my situation. He got close. He got down in that hole with me. And the amazing thing is, I thought back, he only coached me for 1 year, but he influenced my life for a lifetime. How I viewed other people that looked different than me. We shared life together long after he stopped being my coach. And because of that relationship, when I got married, I took my wife, Kathy, to meet Louis Walker. When my kids came along, I took them to his house. And his wife, Gertrude, she would always say, "Can the kids have some candy?" I said, "Yeah, sure." I look back, and the blessing in my life was that I grew up in a neighborhood that was black, white, Hispanic. And the thing we had in common, we were all poor. So as the 60s hit and things were going on all around, it made no sense to us. We didn't have media. There were 2 TVs in the neighborhood. We spent a lot of time at each other's house. I love Mexican food. So the Ruiz family, every day around 5 o'clock, I'd make sure I was on their porch, looking hungry. And their mama called me Carlos. She said, Carlos, you go home now. And I would give her that sad face, but I just love a burrito or a taco. And after a while, she just gave up, and she just said, "You want something to eat?" And I'd be right in the house. But the commonality, like I said, we were all poor, and that was the thing that bonded us together. Fast forward, and I'm trying to stay on track here. Time is running out. Having these conversations, some of my friends who are white would say, "I don't understand. I don't want to say anything offensive. And a couple years ago, I thought, I was 63 at the time. I'm 65 now. I said, just say what you want to say. If you say something to offend me, I'm old enough now, I will let you know. I encourage you today, take a risk. Take a risk as you share around your table with somebody who has a different experience than you. Say what's on your mind. And if you're at the table and what they say offends you, explain to them why. Don't try to fix that person. We do better with empathy on the backside of a tragedy, don't we? When Hurricane Harvey hit, one of the things I noticed that the flood, the hurricane, it didn't separate people by what color they were, how much money they had, where they lived, what kind of car they drove. As those waters flooded the community, I was watching the news, and I noticed that when those boats came through the community, those who needed help didn't care what color the person was who was driving the boat. And some amazing stories came out of that. We do a great job at reacting, and right now we're sitting on the cusp of another volatile situation that's just 90 miles down the road. Whew. Will we take the courage to climb down in the hole and have close proximity that we might empathize with those who are going through these issues in their communities? And just ask some hard questions. How did you get there? What influenced your life? For me, that was asking my parents, my mother, my grandmother, because I really didn't know my father. Mom, what influenced Dad? Why was he an alcoholic? Why did he do some of the things that he did? Remember I said earlier, we're products of those who get a hold of us first. So if your views have been shaped by the media or somebody who you know was prejudiced, because we all have them in our family. Prejudice knows no color, okay? Like I found that out working at the Youth Authority. But my career has parallel empathy everywhere I went. Driving for Dollaride, senior citizens, people confined to Ralston Towers, young people who were going to school at Howard Training Center, then working in a place where young men were incarcerated who never had a chance. You read a file and you go, man, I see why you're here. I remember telling my mother one time when one of our countless visits to see my dad going to San Luis Obispo, I said, Mom, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of coming to visit Dad in these places. And then God, in his sense of humor, said, guess where you're going to work a few years from now? But the thing that made it different for me is the fact that I could empathize with those young men. And that is my time. You didn't play the theme from Jeopardy, man. But I want to encourage you around your table just to look at those questions again and ask yourself, how will I push that needle toward empathy from empty to full? And I just want to share that one statement again. The problem, the tragedy lies in the fact that men know so little of men. I used to hide in my shame from the things that went on in my life. And freedom came when I accepted those things and began to talk about them with others. And by doing that, you'd be surprised who you can help. But thank you for allowing me this time to share with you.
Thank you, Carl. There's a brave man right there. This is a conversation we must have. in this room, in this community, and across this country. And I've been blessed by my conversations with Carl. And he's put a challenge out there for us. Let's take about 10 minutes. There are some questions on the screen around your table. Let's talk about these two questions. By the way, let's give Carl one more round of applause, okay?